The champagne flute trembled in Audrey Bennett's hand as she approached Table 7, the best table at Luminescence, Chicago's most exclusive restaurant. 3 men in tailored suits sat engaged in conversation, their faces animated in the amber glow of crystal chandeliers. The 4th chair remained occupied only by a navy blazer and a smartphone that wouldn't stop buzzing. The boy, no older than 12, sat slumped against his father's arm, his face flushed despite the restaurant's perfect climate control. "Would you gentlemen care for another round?" Audrey asked, her practiced smile masking the concern blooming in her chest. Richard Westbrook, CEO of Westbrook Pharmaceuticals and a regular at Luminescence, barely glanced up. "Yes. And bring my son another lemonade. He's not feeling well today, but this meeting couldn't wait." The dismissive wave of his hand sent Audrey retreating toward the bar, but her eyes lingered on the boy. Something wasn't right. In her 3 years working at Luminescence while struggling through nursing school, Audrey had developed an eye for detail. The way the boy's breathing seemed shallow, how his fingers kept touching his throat, the unusual flush across his cheeks that didn't match typical embarrassment or fever. These details nagged at her as she placed the drink order. "That Westbrook kid looks terrible," remarked Justin, the bartender. "Guess even Billionaire's kids get the flu." "It's not the flu," Audrey murmured, watching as the boy shifted uncomfortably in his seat. 2 days earlier, during her pediatrics rotation, Professor Dawson had delivered a lecture on recognizing the subtle signs of anaphylaxis in children, how they often presented differently than adults. "Sometimes the most critical symptoms aren't dramatic. They're quiet, easily dismissed," the professor had said. "And that's when children die." The memory sent a chill down Audrey's spine as she carried the fresh drinks on her silver tray. The boy now had a barely perceptible rash spreading up his neck, and his breathing had become more labored. As she set the lemonade before him, she noticed him pushing away a barely touched plate of the chef's special, pan-seared scallops with a hazelnut crust. "Is everything all right with your meal?" she asked the boy directly, ignoring protocol that dictated she address the adults first. "My throat feels funny," the boy whispered, "and my tongue is big." Richard Westbrook frowned at the interruption. "Tyler's fine. He has allergies, but Dr. Morrison here checked him before we came. He's cleared him to try new foods as part of his desensitization therapy." He nodded toward one of his companions, a silver-haired man who offered a clinical smile. "Of course, Mr. Westbrook. I apologize for the intrusion." Audrey stepped back, her mind racing. She glanced at Dr. Morrison, who was more interested in his wine than his patient. The third man, introduced earlier as Westbrook's legal counsel, continued discussing contract terms as if nothing were amiss. At the next table, Audrey overheard fragments of the men's conversation. Clinical trials, breakthrough treatments, a merger announcement planned for tomorrow. Millions of dollars hung in the balance of this dinner meeting. No wonder Westbrook had brought his son along rather than cancelling. Tyler's hand now trembled as he reached for his lemonade, and a barely audible wheeze escaped his lips. The sound crystallized Audrey's suspicions into certainty. She moved deliberately to the service station, her heart hammering against her ribs. Manager protocols dictated that servers never question a guest's medical choices or suggest medical interventions. It was grounds for immediate termination. Luminescence catered to the elite, those who valued discretion above all. But nursing school had taught her a different protocol. When a life hangs in the balance, nothing else matters. "Marcus," she whispered to her manager, "the Westbrook boy at table 7 is having an allergic reaction, anaphylaxis. I'm certain of it." Marcus Cooper's eyes widened. "Are you sure? His father has Dr. Morrison with him, one of the city's top allergists." "I'm sure, and if we wait, he could die." She met Marcus's gaze with unwavering confidence. "There's an epinephrine injector in my bag in the break room. My cousin has the same allergies." Marcus hesitated, years of hospitality training warring with basic human concern. "Westbrook is our biggest client. If you're wrong—" "And if I'm right," Audrey countered. A crash from table 7 interrupted their standoff. Tyler had knocked over his lemonade, his hands now clutching at his throat, eyes wide with panic. The wheeze had transformed into a distinctive stridor, the sound of air struggling to move through a closing airway. "Doctor." Morrison was now examining the boy, but with a puzzled expression that sent alarm bells ringing through Audrey's mind. "It must be anxiety," she heard him say. "The desensitization protocol shouldn't cause this response." Audrey didn't wait for permission. She bolted for the break room, ignoring the shocked stares of other diners. Her trembling hands found her bag, buried beneath her winter coat. The epinephrine auto-injector felt cool against her palm as she raced back to the dining room. By the time she returned, Tyler's lips had taken on a bluish tinge. Dr. Morrison had loosened the boy's collar and was suggesting they move him outside for fresh air, exactly the wrong approach for anaphylaxis. "He needs epinephrine now," Audrey announced, stepping forward with the injector. Richard Westbrook's face contorted with anger. "What the hell do you think you're doing? Morrison says it's anxiety." Dr. Morrison rose, indignation flashing across his face. "Young lady, I've been treating this patient for years. This isn't anaphylaxis, it's a panic attack coupled with seasonal allergies." Audrey stood her ground. "With all due respect, doctor, he has urticaria spreading up his neck, stridor, and his lips are turning blue. The hazelnut crust on the scallops, is he allergic to tree nuts?" The flicker of uncertainty that crossed Dr. Morrison's face told her everything. Westbrook turned to the doctor. "You said hazelnuts were in the probably safe category." "They were, theoretically. The skin tests showed minimal reaction," Dr. Morrison stammered. Tyler's fingers were now clawing at the tablecloth, his chest heaving with increasingly futile attempts to breathe. "We don't have time for debates," Audrey said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I'm a nursing student, and this is anaphylaxis. If we don't treat it now, he could die in the next few minutes." The restaurant had gone silent, dozens of Chicago's elite watching the drama unfold. Richard Westbrook, a man accustomed to commanding rooms and making split-second billion-dollar decisions, looked from his gasping son to the determined waitress with the injector. "Do it," he finally said. With practiced movements that belied her nervousness, Audrey knelt beside Tyler. "This will hurt for a second, but then you'll feel better," she told him, pulling his pant leg aside to expose his outer thigh. She pressed the auto-injector firmly against his leg and heard the click that delivered the life-saving medication. 10 seconds. 20. The entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath along with Audrey as she counted silently. Then, almost imperceptibly at first, Tyler's breathing eased. The desperate clawing of his fingers relaxed, and color began returning to his face. "Call an ambulance," Audrey instructed, maintaining pressure on the injection site. "The epinephrine will help temporarily, but he needs emergency care. Anaphylaxis can have a biphasic response. It could come back worse within hours." As if awakened from a trance, Marcus rushed to the phone. Dr. Morrison knelt beside Audrey, his earlier certainty replaced with humility, as he helped monitor Tyler's vital signs. Richard Westbrook had not moved, his expression unreadable as he watched his son's life hang in the balance, saved not by his wealth or connections, but by a waitress working her way through nursing school. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance, drawing closer to Luminescence's gleaming facade. Audrey remained beside Tyler, her hand steady on his wrist, counting his strengthening pulse. For the first time since she'd approached table 7, she allowed herself to breathe deeply. What she didn't know, couldn't know, was how this moment would alter the trajectory of her life, entangling her fate with the Westbrooks in ways she could never have imagined. As the paramedics rushed in, she caught Richard Westbrook's gaze. The gratitude in his eyes carried something else, something that sent a different kind of shiver down her spine. Recognition. Not of her person, but of her potential, and the dawning realization that he had overlooked something valuable hiding in plain sight. 2 weeks after the incident at Luminescence, Audrey Bennett stood outside the imposing glass headquarters of Westbrook Pharmaceuticals, clutching her resume in one hand and a coffee in the other. The autumn wind whipped through the Chicago streets, scattering golden leaves across the plaza, where a massive sculpture, a double helix that deliberately avoided resembling DNA per the company's branding guidelines, twisted toward the sky. She had been summoned here by a brief formal email from Richard Westbrook's assistant. "Mr. Westbrook requests your presence to discuss a potential opportunity." No explanation, no context, just an address, a date, and a time that required her to reschedule her clinical rotation. The night at the restaurant had ended in a blur. Paramedics had whisked Tyler away, with his father accompanying him in the ambulance. Dr. Morrison had followed in his own car, shame etched into the lines of his face. Marcus had sent her home early, his expression unreadable. By the next morning, Audrey had convinced herself she would be fired. Protocol violations of that magnitude weren't overlooked in establishments like Luminescence. Instead, She had arrived at work to find a massive bouquet of lilies and a handwritten note. "You saved my son's life. I won't forget that. Richard Westbrook." Accompanying it was a check with more zeros than she had ever seen, enough to cover her remaining tuition and then some. The money had felt simultaneously like a blessing and a burden. She hadn't cashed it yet, unsure what accepting such a sum would mean. Now, as she approached the security desk, she wondered if this meeting was about the money. Perhaps Westbrook wanted to ensure her silence about the incident to protect both his and Dr. Morrison's reputations. "Audrey Bennett for Richard Westbrook," she told the security guard, trying to project confidence she didn't feel. 20 minutes and 3 elevator rides later, she was ushered into a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan. Richard Westbrook stood with his back to her, phone pressed to his ear. "I don't care what the focus groups say," he was saying, his voice carrying the same authoritative tone she remembered from the restaurant. "The side effect profile is too risky. We're not putting it forward for approval. End of discussion." He hung up without waiting for a response and turned to face her. Up close, without the dim lighting of the restaurant, Richard Westbrook looked both more imposing and more human. His salt-and-pepper hair was perfectly styled, but shadows beneath his eyes hinted at sleepless nights. The tailored suit couldn't quite hide the slight stoop of his shoulders, a man carrying invisible weights. "Ms. Bennett, thank you for coming." He gestured toward a seating area by the window. "Please." Audrey sat, smoothing her skirt, the nicest one she owned, purchased during a rare splurge at a department store sale. "How is Tyler?" she asked, surprising herself with her directness. A smile softened Westbrook's features. "Fully recovered, thanks to you, and much more careful about reading ingredient lists." He sat across from her, studying her face. "You haven't cashed my check." "I wasn't sure if I should." "Because you think it comes with strings attached." Audrey met his gaze. "Doesn't it? Money like that usually does." Westbrook leaned back, something like respect flickering in his eyes. "Fair assumption. But in this case, the only string was getting you to come here today so I could offer you a job." Of all the scenarios Audrey had imagined, this hadn't been one of them. "A job? Mr. Westbrook, I'm still in nursing school. I have clinicals and I'm aware of your schedule. I've spoken with Dean Harriman at your school." He raised a hand at her surprised expression. "Yes, I made some calls. I was curious about the woman who saw what a board-certified allergist missed." "That's a bit invasive," Audrey said, discomfort rising in her chest. "It's thorough," Westbrook corrected. "And what I learned was impressive. Top of your class despite working full-time. Clinical instructors who rave about your observational skills, and a personal history that explains your interest in anaphylaxis." Audrey stiffened. He'd discovered her past, the childhood tragedy she rarely discussed. "My brother's death was private family business. And yet it shaped you, drove you to notice what others missed with my son." Westbrook's voice softened slightly. "I apologize if my research feels intrusive, but I needed to understand who you are before making this offer." "Which is what exactly?" Westbrook stood and walked to his desk, returning with a folder which he placed before her. "Westbrook Pharmaceuticals is launching a new division focused on emergency response medications, epinephrine delivery systems, emergency antidotes, rapid response treatments, the kind of medications that save lives in critical moments." Audrey opened the folder to find a job description. "Clinical Consultant, Patient Advocacy Program." "We need someone who understands both the clinical and human sides of emergency medicine," Westbrook continued. "Someone who can help ensure our products meet real-world needs, not just clinical trial specifications. The position includes flexible hours to accommodate your studies, full benefits and tuition coverage for the remainder of your program." The salary listed made Audrey's eyes widen. It was 4 times what she made at Luminescence. "This is generous." "It's strategic," Westbrook corrected. "What happened with Tyler exposed a blind spot in our approach. Dr. Morrison isn't the only physician who sometimes misses what's right in front of him. Too many doctors are isolated from the realities of how their patients actually experience symptoms." Audrey closed the folder. "Mr. Westbrook, I appreciate the offer, but I can't help feeling this is more about your gratitude than my qualifications. I'm still a student." "You're selling yourself short, Ms. Bennett. This isn't charity or gratitude. It's recognition of talent. You have something that can't be taught, the ability to see what others miss, especially under pressure. That's rare and valuable. Before she could respond, the office door opened and Tyler Westbrook entered, looking remarkably different from the sickly boy she'd last seen. His complexion was healthy, his eyes bright with curiosity as they landed on her. "Dad, is this her? The waitress who saved me?" Richard Westbrook's expression softened as he looked at his son. "Yes, this is Ms. Bennett. And what did we discuss about knocking before entering my office during meetings?" Tyler grinned, unapologetic. "Sorry, but Mom said I could come meet her if I finished my homework." He extended his hand to Audrey with surprising formality. "Thank you for saving my life, Ms. Bennett." The sincerity in the boy's voice caught Audrey off guard. She shook his hand, noticing the medical alert bracelet now encircling his wrist. "You're welcome, Tyler. How are you feeling?" "Better. Dad fired Dr. Morrison." He stated this matter-of-factly, as though discussing the weather. Richard cleared his throat. "Tyler, that's not something we discuss publicly." "But it's true," Tyler insisted. "And now I have a new doctor who actually listens when I say something feels wrong." He turned back to Audrey. "Dad says you might come work with us." "You should. The office next to his has the best view of the lake." Audrey glanced at Westbrook, who had the decency to look slightly embarrassed. "Tyler, Ms. Bennett would not be working directly with me. She would be joining Dr. Patel's team in clinical development." Tyler shrugged. "Still, you should take the job. Dad never offers jobs to people himself unless he really wants them on his team." "Thank you for that insight, son," Westbrook said dryly. "Perhaps you could give Ms. Bennett and me a moment to finish our discussion." After Tyler departed, an awkward silence filled the office. Audrey finally broke it. "You fired Dr. Morrison." Westbrook's expression hardened. "He nearly killed my son through arrogance and negligence. His desensitization therapy was experimental at best, dangerous at worst, and when the symptoms began, he was too proud to recognize his mistake." He exhaled slowly. "But that's not why I asked you here today." "Isn't it, though?" Audrey challenged. "Your son nearly died because a medical professional missed obvious symptoms. Now you want to hire someone, me, who won't miss those details, someone who will speak up, even when it's uncomfortable." A smile tugged at the corner of Westbrook's mouth. "You're perceptive in more ways than one, Ms. Bennett. And blunt. I should warn you about that. I consider that an asset, not a liability." He gestured to the folder. "Take the weekend to consider the offer. Talk to your advisors at school if you wish. But no, this isn't just about what happened with Tyler. It's about what I believe you can bring to this company, and to patients who need advocates like you." As Audrey left the Westbrook Pharmaceuticals building an hour later, her mind swirled with possibilities. The job would solve her financial struggles instantly, allow her to complete her education without working overnight shifts, and potentially give her a platform to influence medical products used nationwide. Yet, something nagged at her. A sense that there was more to Westbrook's interest than he was revealing. The coincidence seemed too perfect, a near tragedy averted, followed by a life-changing opportunity. In her experience, billionaire CEOs didn't make decisions based on gratitude alone. What she couldn't know was that back in his office, Richard Westbrook was on the phone with his head of security, requesting a more thorough background check on Audrey Bennett, one that would uncover the connection between her family's tragedy and Westbrook Pharmaceuticals' darkest chapter, a connection Audrey herself wasn't fully aware of, but which would soon threaten everything she held dear. 3 months into her role at Westbrook Pharmaceuticals, Audrey Bennett had settled into a rhythm that balanced her final semester of nursing school with her new position. The clinical advocacy team had welcomed her expertise, and Dr. Patel had become both mentor and friend. Even Richard Westbrook had proven to be a more accessible boss than she'd anticipated, stopping by weekly to check on projects and occasionally bringing Tyler, who had developed a cheerful habit of asking Audrey medical questions that ranged from insightful to comically grotesque. On this particular Tuesday morning in January, Audrey arrived early to prepare for a presentation on their newest epinephrine delivery system. The office was quiet, most employees not due for another hour. She set her coffee on her desk and noticed the manila envelope placed conspicuously atop her keyboard. No markings, no labels, just a sealed envelope that hadn't been there when she'd left the previous evening. Curiosity piqued. She opened it to find a stack of photocopied documents, internal memos, clinical trial reports and newspaper clippings, all dating back 15 years. At first, the material seemed random, until a name jumped out from a faded article. Bennett family files suit against pharmaceutical giant. Audrey's coffee grew cold as she read through the documents, her hands trembling. The pieces connected like a macabre puzzle. Westbrook's previous company, North Star Pharmaceuticals, had developed an asthma medication that had been fast-tracked through approval. Her brother, Michael, had been one of 17 children who had suffered fatal reactions to the drug. The subsequent lawsuit had been settled quietly, with records sealed by court order. 6 months after the settlement, North Star had been acquired by a larger company, and Richard Westbrook had started Westbrook Pharmaceuticals with his portion of the buyout. The final document was a confidential memo from Westbrook himself, dated weeks before Michael's death. Preliminary data suggests possible severe reactions in patients with certain genetic markers. Recommend delaying market release until further testing. That recommendation had been overruled by North Star's board of directors. The medication had been released, and Michael had died. Audrey felt the room spin. Her brother's death, the tragedy that had shaped her entire life's path, was connected to the man who now signed her paychecks, the man whose son she had saved. "Ms. Bennett, are you all right?" She looked up to find Richard Westbrook standing in her doorway, concern etched on his face. When his eyes fell to the documents spread across her desk, his expression shifted to something unreadable. "Where did you get those?" he asked quietly, closing her office door behind him. Audrey stood, anger rising in her chest. "They were on my desk this morning. Did you know when you hired me? Did you know who I was?" Westbrook's silence was answer enough. "My brother died because your company rushed a drug to market, a drug you knew wasn't safe." Her voice shook with 15 years of accumulated grief. "Was this job some sort of, what? Guilt offering? Penance?" "It's more complicated than that," Westbrook said, his usual confidence subdued. "Yes, I knew who you were when you saved Tyler. I recognized your name immediately, and didn't think to mention it. By the way, Audrey, my previous company's negligence killed your brother, but here's a job to make up for it." Westbrook flinched at her words. "I wanted to tell you, many times, but I feared you wouldn't take the position if you knew." "You're right about that," Audrey snapped, gathering the documents into the envelope. "Consider this my resignation. Please wait." Westbrook moved to block her exit. "There's more you don't know about what happened after Michael and the others. What could possibly matter now? The memo you're holding, my recommendation to delay, was the reason I was forced out of North Star. I fought the board on releasing that medication. I lost, and 17 families paid the ultimate price." Westbrook's composed facade cracked, revealing genuine anguish. "When I started this company, I made a vow that patient safety would never be compromised for profit. Never again." Audrey's grip tightened on the envelope. "Noble. But it doesn't bring my brother back. No, nothing can." He hesitated, then continued. "But what if you could help prevent other families from experiencing the same loss? The emergency response division you've been working with, it was created specifically to address the failures that led to those 17 deaths. Including Michael's," she said, the anger in her voice now tinged with bitter understanding. "Yes." A knock at the door interrupted their standoff. Dr. Patel entered, looking concerned. "Audrey, I was hoping to review the slides before—" She stopped, sensing the tension. "Is everything all right?" Westbrook straightened, his CEO demeanor sliding back into place. "Just discussing some historical documentation Ms. Bennett uncovered. We'll continue this later." He nodded curtly and left. "Doctor." Patel watched him go, then turned to Audrey. "What was that about?" Audrey hesitated, then handed her the envelope. "Apparently, my new boss has a connection to my family I wasn't aware of." As Dr. Patel skimmed the documents, her expression grew troubled. "Oh, Audrey, I had no idea." She looked up. "What will you do?" "Leave. Look for another job. I can't work for the company connected to Michael's death." But Westbrook wasn't responsible. From these documents, it seems he tried to prevent it. "It doesn't matter. Every time I see him, I'll think of Michael." Dr. Patel sighed. "Before you decide, there's something you should know. The emergency auto-injector you've been helping design, Westbrook fast-tracked it personally, against the board's objections about profit margins. He insisted it needed to be affordable for every school, every restaurant, every public space. She paused. Now I understand why. The revelation hung between them as Audrey struggled to reconcile her anger with this new information. Before she could respond, her phone buzzed with a text from Paula, Tyler's nanny. "Tyler, having bad reaction. In lobby. Need help now." Audrey bolted for the elevator, Dr. Patel close behind. In the lobby, they found Tyler slumped in a chair, Paula frantically rummaging through a backpack. His face was flushed, hives spreading visibly up his neck. "He insisted on a muffin from the cafe across the street," Paula explained, panic in her voice. "I checked with the server. They said no nuts, but his injector, I can't find it." Audrey knelt before Tyler, who was struggling to breathe. "Tyler, look at me. Where's your backup injector, the one you keep in your pocket?" "Left home," he wheezed. "Switched jackets." Dr. Patel was already on her phone. "I'm calling an ambulance." "No time," Audrey said, her nursing training kicking in. "The R&D lab, we have the prototypes." "Those haven't been approved," Dr. Patel objected. "Neither was watching my brother die," Audrey retorted, already lifting Tyler. "Get Richard now!" Together they carried Tyler to the elevator, his breathing growing more labored with each floor. In the lab, Audrey went straight to the secure cabinet where the prototype injectors were stored. Her access card wouldn't work. "Damn it!" Dr. Patel swiped her higher-level badge and the cabinet unlocked. Inside, rows of the new auto-injectors gleamed under the fluorescent lights. Audrey grabbed one, checking the dosage markings. "These are calibrated for adults," Dr. Patel warned. "Tyler needs a pediatric dose." Audrey's mind raced, calculating Tyler's weight against the adult dosing. Too much epinephrine could cause cardiac problems. Too little would be ineffective against the closing airway. In that moment, she understood exactly what Richard Westbrook had faced 15 years ago. A critical decision with life-hanging consequences. "I'll adjust the injection time," she decided, manipulating the prototype's innovative timing mechanism, a feature she had personally advocated for during development meetings. "Instead of a full 3-second deployment, I'll manually stop at 1.5 seconds. Tyler's lips were turning blue as Audrey pressed the injector against his thigh. "This will hurt, buddy, but it'll help you breathe." The click of the injector releasing its medication seemed impossibly loud in the quiet lab. Audrey counted, her hand steady, despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. At precisely 1.5 seconds, she pulled the device away, praying her calculations were correct. For 5 agonizing seconds, nothing happened. Then Tyler gasped, a deep, shuddering breath that seemed to fill the entire room with relief. Color slowly returned to his face as the medication took effect. The lab doors burst open, and Richard Westbrook rushed in, panic evident in his usually composed features. He fell to his knees beside his son, gathering him into his arms with a vulnerability Audrey had never witnessed from him. "The prototype worked," Dr. Patel told him, her voice hushed with both relief and professional excitement. Audrey modified the dosing on the fly. Richard looked up at Audrey, gratitude and something deeper, a shared understanding of loss averted in his eyes. "Thank you." Again, in that moment, with Tyler breathing steadily between them, Audrey felt the weight of her anger shift, not disappear, never that, but transform into something more complex. The documents in her office revealed a history she couldn't change. But here, now, was a future she could help shape, one that might prevent other families from experiencing what hers had. What she didn't yet know was that the mysterious envelope hadn't appeared by accident, and that the person who had placed it there was watching their every move, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal the final, devastating truth about the connection between the Bennetts and the Westbrooks, a truth that would force Audrey to make the most difficult choice of her life. The emergency with Tyler had postponed Audrey's resignation, but not her suspicions. After ensuring he was stable and transferred to the hospital for observation, she returned to her office, the manila envelope of documents still sitting on her desk, like a ticking bomb. She hadn't told Tyler's father about her intention to leave. Somehow, after saving his son a second time, walking away felt more complicated than before. As she gathered her belongings, a new email notification pinged on her computer. The sender was anonymous, the subject line chilling, "The real reason Westbrook hired you." Against her better judgment, Audrey opened it. Inside was a single line of text. Parking garage, level B2, 7 p.m. and an attached photo. The image showed a young Richard Westbrook with his arm around a laughing woman who looked startlingly familiar, though Audrey couldn't immediately place her. Curiosity warred with caution as 7 o'clock approached. Ultimately, Audrey found herself descending in the parking garage elevator, pepper spray clutched in her coat pocket. The garage was nearly empty at this hour, most employees having departed for the day. Her footsteps echoed ominously across the concrete floor as she scanned the dimly lit space. "Miss Bennett," Audrey whirled around to find an elegant woman in her 60s emerging from between two parked cars. Her silver hair was swept into a chignon, and despite the casual setting, she wore a tailored pantsuit that spoke of wealth and influence. "I'm Elaine Morrison," the woman said, extending a manicured hand. "Dr. Morrison's wife. Or ex-wife, I should say. The divorce was finalized last month." Audrey didn't take the offered hand. "You sent me those documents and the email." Elaine nodded, unperturbed by the rejection. "I did. Robert lost everything because of what happened with the Westbrook boy. His position, his reputation, our marriage. Though the last one was a long time coming." She smiled thinly. "I thought you deserved to know who you're really working for." "Why? What do you gain from this?" "Call it a parting gift to Richard. We have history." Elaine reached into her designer handbag and withdrew another envelope. "These are the documents he doesn't want you to see. The complete story of what happened 15 years ago." Audrey took the envelope cautiously. "I already know about the medication that killed my brother, but you don't know why your brother specifically was prescribed that medication, or why Richard recognized your name immediately when you saved Tyler." Elaine's smile turned sad. "Look at the photo in the email I sent you. Really look at the woman." Audrey pulled out her phone, examining the image more closely. The laughing woman beside young Richard had warm eyes, a dimpled smile, and, Audrey's heart skipped, the same distinctive mole above her left eyebrow that Audrey saw in her own reflection every day. "That's my mother," she whispered, disbelief coloring her voice. "How—" "Margaret Bennett was the lead researcher on the asthma drug development team," Elaine explained, "and she was involved with Richard, quite deeply, before she met your father. When she raised concerns about the medication's safety, particularly for children with certain genetic markers, she was silenced by the board, just like Richard." The garage seemed to spin around Audrey as pieces clicked into place. "My mother never told me she worked at North Star, because by the time the tragedy occurred, she had already left the company and the relationship. She married your father, had you and your brother, and built a new life." Elaine nodded toward the envelope. "But when children started dying from the medication, she recognized the symptoms instantly. She tried to warn others, became a whistleblower. That's when the threats began." Audrey's knees weakened as a long-buried memory surfaced. Her mother's tearful phone calls, hushed arguments between her parents, suddenly moving to a new house in a different school district. "The car accident that killed my parents, it wasn't random, was it?" Elaine's silence was answer enough. "But that would mean—" Audrey couldn't complete the thought, the implications too horrific to voice. "North Star's board chairman was willing to go to extreme lengths to protect the company's stock price," Elaine confirmed grimly. "Richard discovered the truth too late to save your parents, but he made sure the chairman faced justice. Though financial crimes, not murder, the evidence wasn't strong enough." "And my brother? Was his prescription deliberate too? That's the question that should keep you up at night." Elaine checked her watch. "I've said enough. What you do with this information is your choice, but remember, Richard Westbrook has known who you are from the beginning. Every interaction, every opportunity he's given you, it's all been driven by guilt." With that parting shot, Elaine Morrison strode toward the elevator, leaving Audrey alone with revelations that shattered everything she thought she knew about her life. The hospital corridor was quiet at 9 p.m. as Audrey approached Tyler's room. Through the partially open door, she could see Richard Westbrook sitting beside his son's bed, reading aloud from what appeared to be a science textbook, while Tyler interjected questions. She hesitated, the second envelope heavy in her bag. Part of her wanted to burst in, demand answers, confront Westbrook with the devastating truth Elaine had revealed. Another part, the part trained to observe, to connect symptoms to causes, urged caution. There were still missing pieces to this puzzle. Before she could decide, Richard looked up and spotted her. His expression shifted from surprise to resignation, as though he'd been expecting this moment. He said something to Tyler, squeezed his shoulder, and stepped into the hallway, gently closing the door behind him. "You've spoken with Elaine," he said. "It wasn't a question. How did you know?" "Security footage from the garage. I've been cautious since those documents appeared on your desk." Elaine made her intentions clear during the divorce proceedings. Audrey crossed her arms. "Is it true about my mother, my parents' accident?" Richard exhaled slowly, shoulders sagging under an invisible weight. "Yes, most of it, but not in the way Elaine likely presented it." "Then tell me your version." Her voice was steely with restraint. "Not here." He nodded toward a family consultation room across the hall. "Tyler doesn't need to overhear this." The small room was designed for difficult conversations. Comfortable chairs, boxes of tissues, subdued lighting. Audrey sat rigidly while Richard closed the door. "I loved your mother," he began simply. "We were young, brilliant, idealistic. We both believed we could change medicine for the better." He paced as he spoke, unable to meet Audrey's eyes. "When the board overruled our safety concerns about the medication, Margaret resigned in protest. I stayed, thinking I could fight from within. It was the first of many mistakes." "And their deaths? The accident?" Richard's face contorted with old pain. "By the time I gathered enough evidence of Gordon Sheffield's corruption, it was too late. Your parents were already gone. The police ruled it an accident, but we all knew it was Sheffield's doing. Why didn't you come forward, tell the authorities?" "I tried. The evidence was circumstantial. Sheffield was powerful, connected. Instead, I built a case around his financial crimes, which eventually sent him to prison." His eyes finally met hers, haunted by old ghosts. "It wasn't justice, but it was something." "And my brother's death? Was that targeted too?" "No." The word was emphatic. "Michael's prescription was tragic coincidence. But it's why I left North Star, why I started Westbrook Pharmaceuticals with safety protocols that the industry called excessive." He paused, his next words carefully chosen. "When you saved Tyler that night, when I heard your name, it felt like Margaret had somehow reached across time to save my son through her daughter." The sincerity in his voice made Audrey's carefully constructed anger waver. "Why not tell me this from the beginning? How could I? Hello, I'm Richard Westbrook. I loved your mother, failed to protect your family, and now I want to offer you a job." Bitterness edged his voice. "I convinced myself you were better off not knowing. That the position was justified by your talent alone, which it was. But the truth is, I couldn't pass up the chance to have Margaret's daughter helping fulfill the mission we once shared." Silence fell between them, heavy with decades of interconnected tragedy and loss. Outside the consultation room, hospital life continued. Nurses checking vitals, families visiting patients, life and death coexisting in the antiseptic corridors. "I need time," Audrey finally said, "to process all this. To decide what it means for my future here." Richard nodded. "Of course, take all the time you need. The position remains yours, regardless of your decision about the rest of it." As she turned to leave, he added softly, "You have her eyes, you know, and her gift, seeing what others miss, the details that make all the difference." His voice broke slightly. "She would be so proud of the woman you've become." Spring arrived in Chicago, painting the lakefront with new life. 4 months had passed since the revelations in the hospital consultation room, months in which Audrey had taken a leave of absence to sort through her complicated feelings about the past and her place at Westbrook Pharmaceuticals. She had visited her parents' and brothers' graves, had spoken with her mother's old colleagues, had read through journals and letters that painted a picture of the brilliant researcher and loving mother she barely remembered. The grief remained, but it had transformed, from the sharp edges of betrayal to the softer contours of understanding. Today, she stood in Richard Westbrook's office once again, the prototype epinephrine injector that had saved Tyler's life, now sleek and refined in her hands. The FDA had fast-tracked approval after clinical trials showed its innovative design reduced administration errors by 78%. "Production begins next month," she told Richard, who was reviewing the final marketing materials. "We're prioritizing distribution to schools and restaurants first, just as you wanted." He looked up from the papers, studying her with cautious optimism. "And you're sure about the pricing structure?" The board wasn't thrilled about the sliding scale. The board will adapt. As you said once, patient safety over profit margins. She placed the injector on his desk. Besides, early orders have exceeded projections by 30%. Turns out doing the right thing can also be good business. Richard smiled, a genuine expression rarely seen in the corporate environment. Your mother used to say something similar. Where once that comparison would have stung, now Audrey felt a quiet pride. The months of soul-searching had led her not just back to Westbrook Pharmaceuticals, but to a new position, director of the newly created Margaret Bennett Memorial Patient Advocacy Division. Tyler's school presentation went well? She asked, changing the subject. Incredibly well. His science teacher wants him to enter it in the state competition. Richard's face softened with paternal pride. He's talking about becoming a doctor now, says he wants to help people the way you helped him. Smart kid. Gets that from his father. The easy comment surprised them both, a sign of how far they'd come from adversaries to something approaching family, not by blood, but by choice and shared purpose. As Audrey turned to leave, Richard called after her. We're having a small dinner tonight, Tyler's birthday. Nothing fancy, just us and a few close friends. He specifically asked if you would come. She hesitated only briefly before nodding. I'd like that. Walking back to her new office, the one with her mother's name on the door, Audrey reflected on the strange path that had led her here. From a waitress noticing symptoms in a sick child to the architect of a program that would save countless lives, her journey had been shaped by both tragedy and opportunity. The past couldn't be changed. Her brother was still gone, her parents' lives still cut short by corporate greed. But the future remained unwritten, and in that unfinished story, Audrey had found not just a career, but a calling, not just a boss, but a connection to her mother's legacy. As she reached her office, she glanced at the framed photograph now sitting on her desk. Richard and her mother in happier times, their young faces alight with hope and possibility. Beside it sat a newer image, Audrey, Richard and Tyler at the FDA approval celebration, 3 people connected by chance, tragedy and ultimately redemption. Outside her window, Lake Michigan stretched toward the horizon, its waters constantly changing yet somehow eternal, much like the complicated human connections that had brought her to this moment. The past still mattered, it always would. But for the first time in years, Audrey Bennett found herself looking forward with hope rather than backward with grief. She had saved a boy's life by noticing what others missed. Now she would build a legacy of saving many more, a fitting tribute to the brother whose loss had set her on this path and the mother whose work she would now continue.